Vera, thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute delight to have you here. And before we get started, for those people who don't know you very well, please tell us what you do.
Sure. Hi, Louise. So I'm Vera Nagtegaal. I'm the head of the online comparison site called hippo.co.za. We compare mainly financial products such as car insurance, life insurance, and health insurance.
Fantastic. And how long has the company been around for, Vera?
So Hippo has been in existence for almost 13 years now, and I joined them roughly 4 years ago when the business saw an opportunity to not only expand but to look at the brand in a new light. So quite a lot's been happening over the last 4 years in terms of developing the business, looking at new products, looking at new services, and ultimately how we make it easy for people to compare quotes online.
So I just have to add in here, Vera, I have to say, when I first started doing some work in South Africa a few more than a few years ago, but I was really shocked that there were no insurance comparison sites. And people still very much relied on their brokers. So we really are talking about a whole new arena as far as South African consumer habits are concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hippo was the first aggregator in South Africa, or first online insurance quote comparison site. And I think since then, there's been a couple of other players coming into this kind of space and doing things. But South Africa is, I think, now at the point where we're really ripe and ready for digital interaction and online businesses to take the forefront. I feel that being South African, there's sometimes a little bit people are skeptical about believing what they're seeing online and whether it's true. So there's still very much a traditional view in some people's mind that they prefer to talk to a broker and they know that it's a real person that they can trust and build a relationship with. But we're definitely seeing a change in that. Over the last 3 years, we see about 40% of people coming to an online comparison site now rather than going to their brokers. And I'm not saying that they're not still using their brokers, but there's definitely more interest in. And I think it's purely because of the ease of use. And at the end of the day, where we are, and specifically in the current circumstances, it's all about customer experience. If you're not going to focus on your customer and make their lives easier, I think you're going to be in a really bad position.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So, of course, Vera, we're sitting here right in the middle of COVID-19, right? And one of the things that I've been pretty sure of, in fact, when all of this started, I can remember talking to clients at the beginning of February, saying to them, I really believe, we're going to have this exponential shift into digital, especially in South Africa. And gosh, we need that part of it. Forget about the rest of it. We need that bit. And, certainly my vibrant voice was actually not as vibrant as I thought it was. It was probably slightly tepid. And, a lot of this was slightly far-fetched at the time. And yet in a few short months, here we are. And I'd love to hear from you. What have you seen in terms of how you've had to adjust in terms of your business? Has the shift been exponentially digital and virtual? I mean, of course, physically we have to. But what about the business side of things? What have you seen?
Sure. So it's been quite a roller coaster, to be honest with you. I think when we went into lockdown end of March, the first thing I think most businesses needed to do was a reality check and just to be honest about their position and what changes are coming. And like any good business, I think the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to look at your costs. You're going to look at where you can cut costs. You're going to make sure that you're not spending unnecessarily. Keep a close eye on the budget. But then second to that, and especially for consumer-facing brands such as Hippo, you need to make sure that you're talking to your customers in the right manner. And with that, I mean, you can't go on with the marketing strategy that you had planned 6 months ago when things were all still normal and going smoothly. You had to really stop and think, how am I going to talk to my customers now? What is important to them? And should I still be selling them life insurance policies or pushing that messaging? Or maybe it could look opportunistic, especially in the beginning of this process. Should I look at changing that messaging? So I think from a marketing perspective, it's been a really interesting journey over the last 7 weeks. And the one thing I think that we needed to be very honest with ourselves about was that there isn't going to be one perfect plan. So you have to sit every day, look at the environment, look at how people are reacting to your business, look at your messaging, and then readjust it as you go along. And that really has been, I think, the biggest thing just from a marketing point of view for us, that realization that we can't have a 2-week plan or a 3-week plan. We have to have a day-to-day plan. And I think brands that react and businesses that react in that manner is most probably likely to succeed. The new normal is that there is no new standard approach to business. I think you need to be very agile. You've got to be very realistic. And you have to adapt and be brave. And I can't emphasize that enough. We are in a constant process of testing and learning. And almost daily, you have to put out new things and try and see if it works and then bring it back. So, yes, the impact on the business has been severe. Understandably so, consumers for the first couple of weeks weren't necessarily in the mindset where they wanted to go online and look at car insurance quotes or life insurance quotes or whatever the case may be. So there was a big impact on the business. But in that, there was an opportunity for us to say, how do we do things differently and how do we bring meaning to customers' lives in this time and hopefully get them to understand in our scenario or with our business proposition that you could potentially be saving money by comparing quotes, or you could potentially be learning more about financial products that could be really beneficial to you down the line by coming to the site. And that really challenged us.
Yes, I'm just, forgive me if I'm not too familiar with the mechanics of your business, but I would imagine that you have a call center as well as your site.
That's
and my question there would be, how did you shift your call center into the virtual? Because often call centers are a collection of people coming together, sitting in the same office and building and what have you. And I've worked with a couple of organizations that are pure call center in the past. Did you manage to shift everybody into their home environments and continue with the same type of service? Or did you have to shift the service to accommodate the people?
Sure. So, we literally had to, within a space of about a week, or a little bit over a week, move almost 150 call center agents from obviously the office to their homes. We had an incredible technical team helping us out, and I must say our operations team was tremendously good in this aspect, that they knew exactly what we needed. They put it together fairly quickly, and we got people into their homes and working within a space of about 3 to 5 days. Obviously, there were some teething issues, but as a whole, almost 80% of our call center is still working from home. And I think that's the right way of approaching it. I think, once again, talking about agility. In business, I mean, we never would have thought 6 months ago that we needed to send our entire workforce home and get them up and running and ensure that they've got stable internet connection and the right software and so forth. So, I'm proud of my team. I think they did a tremendous job with regards to that. The agents are very productive. We're seeing interesting things in terms of performance that I think we weren't expecting. And potentially that says something about a new way of working moving forward. I think there is a space for working from home. I think it's something that businesses should look at differently moving forward. And the new way of working is most probably going to become normal for us pretty soon.
So South Africa always presents, a few other. It's never perhaps as clean and simple as in other places when it comes to things like taking data into consideration and connectivity, and so moving 150 people home into a variety of environments with a variety of levels of connectivity. I would imagine that probably was the trickiest part with the variables. Would you say that that's true, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, it's different environments, different areas within Joburg where they reside. So once again, you had to really focus attention in terms of what are their needs and get them up and running as soon as possible. Because, as you know, most of call center agents work on commissions. So the longer they don't work, the harder it's going to hit their pockets. And I think with that, you need to look at the technical aspect and what they require, but then also from a mental aspect, you have to ensure that your team is supported, that they're getting the right support day to day, even now through coaching and so forth, online courses, to keep them motivated and still in this digital world that we are now operating all from our homes, have a sense of still being one team and still working towards the same goal. And I think there's hard challenges in terms of your tech, and then there's soft challenges in terms of your mentality and the team spirit and so forth.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went into the people aspect of things, because I've been doing a lot of work around resilience, as I'm sure most people have, and mental health. And I know that there have been a couple of studies published already where mental health declined quite considerably. I think the last study that I had a look at was sort of early April. And I'm sure things have adjusted slightly since then, but we were looking at just over 40% decline in mental health, and yet a rise in productivity. So, this shift into working in the virtual comes, as you say, there are hard problems or hard issues to deal with, and there are people issues to deal with. Do you think that it's sustainable to keep that consistent in terms of the virtual, or will you need to be adaptable in terms of the people themselves, rather than asking people to fit into a system, perhaps a hybrid system later on?
Yeah, I think, and not necessarily looking at Hippo now, but just overall, I think we're most probably moving to a world now where there's going to be some kind of hybrid system in place. I think with a realization that people can work from home and still be productive, it's opening a lot of questions. And I saw yesterday that Twitter is now sending their people home to work from home forever, and giving the option of coming back to the office when lockdown is over, but also if they don't want to, they don't have to. And I think that's a good approach. I think there are certain people that thrive in an office environment, and it's good. And there's certain jobs, I think, that would potentially do better in an office environment. But I also think that there's skills that probably will do better working from home. And if I look at our team, for instance, developers like working at unruly hours, or they're at their most productive midnight to 3 a.m. So why necessarily have a developer sitting in an office space 8 to 5 if they're being more productive later in the day? But I think should probably not be a blanket approach to this, and each organization is different and need to make their minds up about what works for them. But certainly I think it is making us question the way that we always worked, and whether that is the right approach moving forward.
Yeah, it's so interesting how everything is up in the air right now. Everything is open to scrutiny. And, in many senses, and notwithstanding the really, of course, we're not forgetting the awful impact of this disease on human lives and communities and what have you. But at the same time, from a business perspective, I'm finding this really quite stimulating. What else can we do that needed doing?
Yeah.
And without a doubt, as one of my clients said last week, there will be winners and there will be losers in this. And I think, without a doubt, it's those organizations who are prepared to, as you say, be courageous and make the cuts that need to be made in the moment, rather than waiting to see how this will pan out. Vera, I'm really interested in your perspective on the consumer side of things and how people are behaving. Give me some, and we had a little chat the other day, and you had some really interesting, broad-based, observations about what's going on. What are your thoughts about the future?
So I think, to your point, and not being or neglecting the severity of the situation, I think if you just take it as a time to learn more about humanity, it is proving to be very interesting. Take consumers, for instance. We're seeing massive shifts and changes in behavior, and rightfully so. I mean, we've never been through this in recent history. And so how do we prepare for it? You can't. And two things that's happening here. I think from a leadership point of view, what I find quite interesting is this is completely leveling our playing field. So you can have a CEO of an organization and a call center agent sitting around the same table. And potentially the call center agent will have a better idea of how to navigate through this using his tap into his peers in his community than the CEO who might be a little bit removed from that community. So in that regard, I think experience and what we've learned and so forth plays a role, but we also have to be open to the fact that nobody knows what's going on right now. So we have to be open to everybody's ideas. And certainly in my marketing team, sometimes the most junior guys have the best ideas right now, simply because they are fresher and they see things in a different perspective. So the other thing is in terms of consumer behavior, we've seen, I think, people obviously returning to self. I think there's a sense of people focusing on what's really important in their lives right now. I think there is a lot of, I always want to say, just going back to yourself and focusing on what is making you rich as a person and away from materialistic things. And with that, I think we're going to see a change in buying patterns, for instance. We know that luxury goods are no longer at this stage seen as an important purchase. We've seen a massive decline in that space, but we also see that people are now after essentials. So grocery shopping is obviously a big one for people. They are looking at services that can help them. They're looking at life insurance, health insurance, those kind of things that is important in their lives right now. And I think with that, you have to be very aware of those spending patterns changing, because that is ultimately going to dictate how the economy is going to get through this as well. And maybe a good time for us to reflect on what we put out there as organizations, and a good time to innovate new products and to look at the product lines that are available and to spot gaps in the market. And also for existing organizations to look at what they've always sold and see whether that's still relevant or whether they should come up with innovative new propositions.
So what have you seen, Vera? Are there people who've been able to do that quite quickly? Are there some interesting things that have popped in the market already that you think, wow, okay, that's pretty interesting. I didn't expect that, or that's been a long time coming. I'm so glad somebody's done it, or anything like that that's really caught your eye?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of brands out there that's really done well in a short space of time, and that was very quick to come to the front and to make a difference in people's lives. I think, for instance, take Pick n Pay as an example. The way that they reacted and opened their shopping hours to pensioners in the beginning to give them space and time to shop in a quieter space. Delivery services, partnerships between Uber Eats and Exclusive Books, for instance, where people still have a real need for books, but they can't get to the shop, and what a beautiful partnership that is. I think the brands that's doing well are brands that are honestly listening to what the needs are and responding in a meaningful manner. And that's so important. I think the days of us just pushing products for the sake of trying to raise revenue is probably not gone, but less desirable right now. Brands that's going to make a meaningful difference in people's lives and encourages the right conversations right now are the brands that's going to thrive. So, yeah, I think some financial institutions as well doing really remarkable work. Some of the banks, I think, came out quite quickly offering payment reliefs and so forth, insurers as well. So I think a lot of the big organizations are doing the right things. Whether it's going to be sustained and whether that's going to be something that can be sustained remains to be seen. But I think the brands that's honest with themselves and their customers are the ones that's really winning right now.
Yeah, so there are two things in all of that, Vera, that really struck me. One is that innovation comes from within our teams. And the interesting thing is it always has. We just haven't always listened, right? Yeah. So we fill job specs and we put people into roles. And often, there are innate capabilities in our organizations that we've never really interrogated. because we haven't needed to. There's been the ability to just hire somebody else who can do that piece of the puzzle. And often, I don't know about you, but I've often seen, and I've certainly experienced this when I first started working myself for large listed companies, is that if there was something that you were great at doing and it didn't fit the job spec, you were asked just to sit back and keep it to yourself. And immensely frustrating if you had those talents or that innate capability. And I think this idea about building cultures of innovation rather than innovation living as a separate entity or a way to digitize something or a part of strategy to get something to market or in an innovation team, but to actually bring that or weave it into the very fabric of our organizations, into the heartbeat of our organizations, so that we are utilizing everything that we've got. Including the most junior person on the team. But that really means democratizing innovation, and it means that we've got to create the environment for that to be allowed to emerge. There's a fantastic book by the name of Range, which is really worth reading, where they get into the background, the stats behind it, and show that the people at the table very seldom come up with the next big idea. It's always somebody coming in from the outside. So perhaps that's something worth looking at, and we're seeing that today. And the other thing, of course, is this idea of leaders being leaders. What does leadership look like? And I love the fact that you said that, that's shifting and changing. And for me, it's a simple scenario where we've gone from needing to be thought leaders or needing to know the answers, because right now we can't know the answers. As you said, we haven't done this before, to being thought partners to every single person in our business and our stakeholders, because that's how we learn. That's where the good stuff's going to come from. And and just this much more conscious way of doing business, really leaning in and listening and trusting that our customers will tell us what they need and being able to respond in real time. Vera, I'm always quite cognizant of the fact that there are some companies that are not able to be as agile or resilient in the way that they operate. What do you see in the next 12 months, 24 months? And I know futures are a tough question because we're all just pulling it out of thin air right now. But, how do you see your industry shape-shifting over the next 12, 24 months, bearing in mind what we've experienced so far and what's likely to come?
Sure. It's a very tough question. And I think one that we constantly ask ourselves as well, because as much as we are in a planning mode now, just taking it day by day and then trying at least to see some kind of future, it's very tough to say, because if we take it 4 months ago, we had no idea that this thing was going to run the course it's running. And I think the effect of that is going to have dramatic effect on a lot of businesses. And unfortunately, we know that job losses are coming. We know that a lot of small companies are probably not going to make it. And how do we keep this economy alive? And how do we ensure that we, as bigger organizations, potentially support the smaller organizations to get through this time? So once again, I think hats off to the banks and so forth, coming forth so quickly and assisting them. But I think if you ask me in our industry what we see, and I think fortunately Hippo is an online business. So if we can weather the storm and we can get through the next couple of months, I think potentially have a brighter future after this. Purely because I think this whole crisis is forcing people to engage online more than ever before. So if you've got a good brand proposition and you show your consumers at the moment what meaning you can add to their lives and have those kind of messages out there, potentially you'll come out of this in a better position. I do think that we'll see an increase in e-commerce platforms, in, like I said, delivery kind of platforms, in services being offered online. I think we'll see potentially services offered online that we haven't seen primarily in the past. Things like personal therapy, for instance, and seeing your psychologist or whatever the case may be. I think it's something that we now realize you can do through a Zoom session, where in the past, that wasn't really on the table. And the great thing about that kind of innovation is that it's making it more accessible to a lot of people. So I think there's positives that will come out of this, but it will take some time. And I think when we just went into lockdown, a lot of it was bomb shock, right? So we were all in a state of shock. We were all traumatized. And it's only now that we're slowly starting to say, okay, how do we survive this? And I think a lot of us are getting our energy back now in terms of, we know what the situation is. Yes, there's still a lot of uncertainty, but if we have enough energy in us now to make it through the next couple of months, we can potentially get through this in a better state.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an important message. And Vera, last but not least, there have been so many pearls of wisdom throughout this session. But if you could leave others with who are perhaps in a similar situation, or leaders at all levels, somewhere with just some insight or advice into what you've actually learned, something succinct that you feel that will stay with you. I think often in times of trouble, there are moments of clarity that we get to keep, the sort of aha moments where it's something that will stay with us for some time. Have there been any of those for you? And if so, what are they?
I think as leaders in business, sometimes and I don't want to say this lightly, but we overanalyze things to death, right? And we sit with spreadsheets and we sit with plans and we replan and we forecast, and that's our nature, because that's how you truly grow, I think, a big business. But if there's one thing that I took out of this, is sometimes you've got to throw the plan out of the window, trust your gut and be brave, and do what feels right, and trust what experience you have in your business to dictate and see what the next step should be. So it's really, once again, just going back to trusting your gut, trusting your decisions, trusting your abilities, and leaning on your team. And I think that was another big thing that came for us out of this last couple of weeks, is how strong your team is around you and the capabilities that they have. And more than ever, no one person will survive this crisis on his or her own. You really have to lean on your team and use them to show you where the blind spots are. Understand that, once again, the junior guy in the team might actually have a better idea or a better plan right now, and lean on that and trust them. And I think that, to me, is the one thing that really stood out, is to see how leaders and organizations came to the front that maybe in the past were the guys sitting at the back of the room not having a lot to say. And really encouraging to see that as well. It's that human agility, I suppose, and strength that's coming to the front.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful to actually see that, as you say, agility, the strength, the courage and the resilience emerge. And of course, we've got to keep an eye on people who are not faring so well at the same time. But Vera, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute delight talking to you. I think my sentiment at the moment is let's do this again in a few months' time and see what we've learned, what we've discovered.
Absolutely.
And where we're at. Thank you, Vera. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Louise. Appreciate it, eh? Cheers.
Yeah.